Hello, everybody. I hope you've got your teas, coffees, rooibos, wherever you want to categorize that, and you're ready for the bi-weekly Bits and Bolts coffee break. As always, we have Stuart Clark. As usually, we have Stuart Clark, the African Territory Manager, and myself, Armaan Sami, the DACH and Netherlands Territory Manager for 42 Gears. We are always here available to you. You see our email addresses down there at the bottom. If there's topics, questions that you have, of course, you can put them in the chats, or you can come back to us and email us directly at either Stuart.Clark at 42 Gears or Armaan at 42gears.com. With that, let's jump into today's topics. I have one topic for you, and Stuart needed to one-up me and show up with two, which I was not ready for. But
it's one and a half.
One and a half. I guess that's why you got the different colors there. So perfect. I was and before we get too deep into it, I know Saurav mentioned that he would try to show you guys something very cool and different with wearables. Sadly, he had I guess earlier this week, had called away on a difficult deployment. So he's busy. Hopefully he'll be here next session. And if he is not, we'll have him record this to be able to show you that session. And we'll show it not live, but recording of it, and then we can discuss it afterwards. But today, I'm going to talk about the best practice for pushing OEM config to a device. This specifically came out of a topic out of one of Saurav's topics last time, where we discussed Zebra management and pushing stage now configurations. We got some interesting feedback I'll talk about in a moment. Then we had SureLock settings. So Stuart will cover SureLock, the user-specific job shortcuts in SureLock. And finally, he'll talk about what you have probably already seen or maybe got an email about, but the SureMDM console new mapping / grid views and layouts. So if nothing else, I'm very interested on that very last one, although Stuart mentioned it's a half point. But with that, let's dive into it, because for me, it was quite interesting. Again, I'm here looking at my MDM console. I've got my my Zebra TC22 device, and I have always been a fan of what Saurav mentioned, and that being using a MX job to push a MX config this way. Very simple. When you import it, you see the text, and then you see the two lines. What's then beautiful, and my favorite function, is when I apply it to a device, I see exactly what failed and what succeeded with feedback. Now, I love this. We did this session, and afterwards, I get a call from a member of Zebra who says, "Hey, Armaan, I love the bits and bolts. I love what you guys were showing, but actually, we don't recommend you do this method." The reason for this being that Zebra Stage Now and MX is not being end of life, but is being developed much slower than OEM config. So we got into this discussion of, okay, well, I'm not a huge fan of using profiles, OEM configs, because the application itself gets pushed over Google, and I'm not always aware of what works or what succeeds or what fails. And also, when at the time does it get pushed out to the devices, not always how can I say this, reliable. Maybe it happens right away, maybe it takes some time. And their suggestion was actually quite interesting. So if you go to the App Store, and let me just quickly show you this, like if you just search Zebra OEM Config APK, you can directly find and download the OEM config from Zebra. So you have it here in downloads, you have the Android downloads, and you can download the latest version of OEM config. Then what you can, of course, do is add it to your App Store. So here, for instance, we see I've got the latest version, and I've just added it either through this plus, or just like you would any other, do a add new app. And the beauty of it being here is now it's an APK distributed by SureMDM. And just like any other app which does have an app config, I can either manage this by coming here to Profiles, Add, SureMDM, and coming down here to OEM config. And of course, I can install silently, auto grant permissions if there's scripts. But if I push add, I now have the option to configure or change whatever values I want or I'm interested in configuring here this way. This is one option. The second option is if you don't like using profiles and APKs here, you can do the exact same thing via jobs. So going to Android, installed application, add new app, Play Store, and config, pick the version, and the same permissions and the same functions are available here, as well as the same configurations. So again, something to keep in mind, maybe today and right now, by continuing to use the Stage Now and MX configs available in jobs, that's fine, and it's going to get what you need done, give you that great feedback. However, if you, for whatever reason in the future, there's a feature or function which is only available as part of an OEM config, I heavily recommend that you just, again, Google search it or go to downloads at the Zebra kind of support page, and then you can download the version that you need. And just come here to the link. You can even, come here to the link. You can directly download it and import it into SureMDM or use their same download link. Add it to the App Store, and then either via profiles and jobs, configure it and distribute it. You should, by the way, again, you'll get a failure or a success, but as it's part of a job or a kind of a profile, you won't necessarily see it broken down into each value. So that's sadly missing. But if something is failing, what Saurav mentioned last time with coming to logs and troubleshooting and downloading the RX logger would still give you a little bit more detail on maybe what failed or did not work. But just keep that in mind as you're doing this testing or trying. But good, that is just the quick topic. More or less, I wanted to kind of do a quick announcement as after that meeting with Zebra. This approach was also provided. I thought it was quite interesting. Sadly, I have not seen, and I did some searching, many OEM config apps available for other vendors publicly. Most others still want you to go to the Play Store. However, I'm sure if you reach out to them, and if I had some more time, I could have contacted some of our contacts and got some other OEM agents apps to put into the Play Store. There is nothing more you need to configure. Any app added here with a app config will automatically start to work, and you can use it in profiles and jobs, just like Zebra OEM. Wonderful. Then from my side, that's actually all I wanted to show today. I see there is no questions or chats, so I will leave it to Stuart. Yeah, just checking again. Sadly, nothing for me. But if something comes up, you have questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out. I'll try to get it answered or even confirm it with Zebra if necessary. But Stuart, over to you.
Perfect. Let me quickly share this. Have you got my screen?
Yes, now I do.
Perfect. Super. Thank you. So if I hop back very briefly, the 1.5 obviously, as Armaan mentioned, we're obviously specifically looking at SureLock and user-specific job shortcuts, and it's quite interesting because it's come up regularly in my territory over the last few weeks, and interestingly, in a few minutes before we joined for this webinar, I had a call from another customer or another partner who asked me to take them through the same logic, and so I guess it helped me a little as it allowed me to be able to create some of what I'd wanted to show you anyway, and so I'll take you through those. But really, the use case would be, at least in the scenario that I've come across over the last few weeks, where it's come up quite regularly, is that a user perhaps, and let's use an example of rebooting a device, which was one that we needed just now. There may be a requirement for a user to be able to reboot a device or clear a specific application cache. And historically, perhaps not the rebooting, but clearing the application cache if the device was within a SureLock or a kiosk environment was not available for the user. They needed to be able to get hold of the SureMDM administrator or somebody who had access to SureMDM and ask them to be able to initiate the job on the device to be able to perform that function. And that function really could be almost anything. I've tried to give you two that perhaps have been those that I was exposed to. And so the partners that I've been working with have asked whether there was a way to be able to give the user the ability to initiate that random job on the device. And so there is. And it's done in 3 steps, and they're really pretty simple. And I'll take you through it just to show you the logic so that it makes sense to you. And then please feel free to go and experiment with any of those that you might feel is important or necessary on a deployment of yours. So we begin by creating the job. As I said, in my environment, I have just shown somebody how to do this one specifically for the reboot of a device. In this case, I went to our scripting environment, our run scripting environment, and I had chosen the reboot device script, which is really complicated, just with the word reboot after our SureMDM identifier. And so I would imagine that the large majority of you are familiar with that new job run script, and you have the selection of various scripts that are available, obviously broken up into generic, Knox, those specifically for Samsung, those that are for devices that have a signed enterprise agent, and then some that are specific for Zebra. And you'll see the shortcuts down the left-hand side of the screen that I'm showing right now. So in this case, this quick example that I showed a little bit earlier, the user needed the ability to be able to trigger a reboot on his device via an icon. And so we've built the run script. That's the first section. The second section is to be able to go to the profile that you have running on the device and to be able to add that particular job shortcut. So you see, I'm going to modify my device. In this case, as I said, I've just added it a few moments ago, but we would traditionally go to the add function. And where we would have normally gone and added applications, for example, out of the Play for Work or the Managed Play Store, in this case, we're going to use the shortcut directly below it, known as Jobs Shortcut. Okay. I have a drop-down list of those jobs that I've created. Obviously, there are many in my environment, but I would have selected, in this case, the reboot device job. And this could be, it's obviously free text, so it could be named in whichever way you would like to identify this specific job. I've done this, obviously, and you would see that in my profile right now, I display or it's shown as the application or the job shortcut being the application type, but this is built as part of the profile and is ultimately deployed on the device. So just those 2 steps again, build obviously the job or the function that you're looking for. The second step to be able to add it into the profile under your application policy in order to be able to deploy this to the device. And so we would obviously initiate not necessarily the run of the job initially, but we would have to push the profile to the device in order to continue to the third step. And if you'll remember, obviously the scenario that I gave you in terms of this specific use case was that the users are running in a kiosk environment and obviously have limited access to what's available on the device. So naturally, we need to add this as a shortcut in that kiosk environment. And so I find, and again, this is totally up to you, I find that it's a lot easier to do it from the device, specifically on the shortcut. So let me jump. I'm going to take a remote of this device that I have on my desk and walk you through it over there. As I said, and I didn't have time before I jumped on the call to delete it off the screen that I'm currently sharing, but you will see the reboot device shortcut is here and is available on the display as I'm showing it. I'm going to quickly give you an example of how I built that, and we can delete it and rebuild it again just to be able to show you how this works. So we're going to go to the Manage Shortcuts section of the SureLock configuration. You will see Manage Shortcuts available again. And I'm going to use the second or the middle of these 3 options being the Add Job shortcut. Okay. As you would see, reboot device is obviously there and available on my device right now. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I want to give the example of how we would have normally gone about creating this. So quick walkthrough again, obviously the Manage Shortcuts, I'm going to go to Add Job shortcut. And then interestingly, because it's the only job that's been deployed onto my device via the application profile or the application policy in the profile, you'll see that when I click on the add button, it actually finds that job and gives it to me as the recommended suggestion. So my job called reboot device is there. All I need to do is click on this, and I now have the shortcut added. I obviously have, as I had just now, the ability to be able to go and edit, perhaps change an icon or rename that particular shortcut. But ultimately, what I've done is created a single icon that is available on the device or on the root of the kiosk or the desktop of my device that allows the user to be able to go and press that specific shortcut and obviously action whatever that option was that you had created. So those 3 steps: create the job, configure the action that you're going to be expecting the user to be able to do, add it into the application policy within your profile, and then lastly, assuming that the large majority, I can't think of anybody who would need to do this outside of SureLock, but remember to add the shortcut within your kiosk environment so that it becomes available for the user. So really, those 3 simple steps, and I would hope, as it has for me over the last couple of weeks of repeated questioning, that if this is something that you need to be able to do, you will be able to obviously feel comfortable with how to go about it. And then no questions. Armaan, is there anything that's come through?
We had one question, which I answered. They were just looking for the link. I hope that for the person who asked it, that you have received it. But they asked the link for the agent, for the Zebra OEM agent. I had shared it again if anyone needs it. Again, you can simply search Zebra OEM Config APK. Thank you for the thumbs up. Perfect. But if not, you can't find it for whatever reason, reach out to us and I can share it with you afterwards. However, your point, oh no, we do have a question. Are we able to add shortcuts for screen off option?
I can't see why not, to be honest, because we have the ability to trigger a script that would put the screen into a let's call it a low power mode. But I actually would need to test it. I don't know if you would know offhand. It seems possible to me.
If I'm not mistaken, the screen on command is just like a shell command with like on or true. And I'm curious, we have to test it, but if turning that to false might just automatically turn it off. So we have to check it, but as that would be a quite standard, I'll tell you what, like if you click on the power button remote supports, it looks like we're turning off the device, screen goes black, but essentially it's turning screen off. So that's definitely a shell command that we're just pushing in the background. Almost certain this is something we could also do.
For sure. I've seen you ask the question. I will test it and I will come back to you directly. So it's definitely something that I assume we would be able to, but let's go and make sure. So thank you. Good. And then the half, just to quickly finish up, I was laughing a little bit earlier when Armaan was saying that you may have received an email, because I think we are not normally very good about sharing some of the new things that we've added. So maybe I missed the email, but there has been some changes. And for those of you who are, I guess, more familiar with going and experimenting with the look and feel of your console, you may have noticed over the last short while that there is an option up on the top right-hand side that mentions the device grid with maps view, and this is I guess we could use an experimental skin or appearance, and you will see it's obviously very easy to be able to click on it. And once I have done that, the same button will revert to the classic view if I wanted to go back to where I'm at. And really, I actually had a chat with one of the product managers this morning to get a feel for where we stand in terms of this experimental console view or look and feel. And it was really interesting. What Manos was able to share was that this was driven largely through obviously our own internal improvements around the way that we feel that the UI can be modified or changed, but also through feedback from customers, and specifically those customers that use a geographical position of a device in order to be able to group them. And so that's very interesting for many of our customers that perhaps are monitoring or managing devices in different countries or in largely sort of spread areas. And the base idea of this, which we now call the grid or map view environment, is to be able to allow you to have from a single view, as opposed to hopping into our location tracking screen and operating the two different environments at the same time. The ability to be able to have a look at obviously the most recent location of a device and to dive directly into it as you might need it. So you'll see in my scenario, I have some devices scattered around the globe, but I have the ability to be able to zoom into one of those, or to be able to click on that specific device or the grouping of the devices and to be able to extract whatever the information is that I need to be able to get from that specific device. Obviously, we have the option to be able to use the standard kind of terrain built map as well as the satellite view. And then as a second option, and you'll notice this direct link that I'm using that you'll see is highlighted almost in the form of a hyperlink, is what you will notice the change within the grid view. So previously, obviously, we had the device info panel down the right-hand side, and that included lots of device-specific information. In this view, if I was to click on the device itself, you will notice that we've consolidated all of those bits of information that would traditionally have been down both the right-hand side in the device info panel, as well as some of the dynamic buttons along the top of the what was known as the device grid in the previous or in the historical classic view, are now available all within this single view. So you'll see as I scroll down, you'll recognize lots of what was in that device panel, the device info panel, as well as, for example, a view of applications running on the device that we normally did through the dynamic apps button and various other of those. And we still have some of our dynamic jobs across the top. So for example, the ability to take remote or access the terminal on a device. Those are all available through these smaller blue buttons that we now have in that same line that was originally where the dynamic buttons were placed. So you'll see it's really changing the environment around, largely, as I said, focused on, or at least the logic behind it is how we make it easy for somebody who is managing devices across different countries to be able to get a very quick snapshot and to be able to jump into those groups of devices and make it easier in terms of the management. One of the other questions I had for Manoj was, who's been using it and what's the feedback? And he gave me 3 examples, and I think this might be interesting for some of you, and particularly if you have customers in these verticals or use cases, I guess. The first was for somebody who's responsible for tracking fleets of vehicles. And I guess it's a no-brainer based on what I've described up until now, is the ability to have a kind of a console view, but overlaid within the mapping and to be able to see the updates of those without running a separate location tracking tab. That's the first. The second, and I guess it's kind of linked to it, is field sales teams. So those field sales users that are out in the field. And one of the interesting points that he mentioned also is that a partner that we have who's currently testing this had explained to him that it had helped them to resolve a specific area where they had an issue with connectivity. So I'm sure you can imagine expanding around details or information, perhaps even some of the compliance jobs that we have, and identifying exactly where those devices are or were when those were triggered is something that could be really useful. And then the last was actually in retail, and I was interested by this one, but it was really about being able to see the consolidated devices in a particular area, in a particular region, or maybe even in a particular store. And largely those were around specific updates. And as I've probably mentioned to a few of you, and I think it's come up before when we've spoken about SureVideo, many of our customers using, or at least many of our customers in the retail environment are using SureVideo as a method of being able to share promotional information on user viewable screens or devices in that environment. So just some ideas, but really, I think it's probably the most important thing that I wanted to be able to share is, as I said, this is an experimental view. It's something that we are building and something that we're improving, and both ourselves and the product management team would really love your feedback if you have already played, or if you're going to go and give it a bit of a play around today, and please feel free to share that. It's absolutely something that we'd love to continue to work on and make it something that is real and valid for your environment. Anything to add, Armaan? It's obviously it was the half, so I need to give you the opportunity to add to that.
I mean, for me, I think my biggest actual feedback would not be the map. I have had multiple customers kind of prefer rather than having one long view, having one click. So kind of staying in the grid view that you are right now, but then being able to click on a device from that view and see that same kind of hyperlinked task for multiple reasons. One, I have a partner or customer that would prefer to see this as an API link as a direct link, versus if you use the direct links in the old console, you just kind of saw that device filtered. And you still had to focus on the small details on the right, versus if you're doing some API integration, having this part of the portal linked is much more interesting, as it's much more helpful. And also how on the left you have logs and reports and everything. We do have one more question just popped in. Are we able to make the new console for specific users only? Did you ask Manoj and the team? I don't know, Stuart.
I don't. Yeah, I actually don't know. I will go and find out. And if it's not there already, it would be a great suggestion to add, particularly seeing as we're giving you so many or so much user control, both in the console environment and from a kind of a hub perspective for those partners that are using hubs. So
yeah,
so something that's really interesting.
My gut tells me it is user specific, because the layout and the colors and the dashboards and views are user specific.
Yeah.
However, I just wanted to search to see if there is roles, and I don't see it as a role. So
apologies,
console.
My sort of answer was based on whether the let's call it the SureMDM administrator was able to define that. For example, user Armaan needs to make use of the map view as opposed to the classic view. That I don't think is in place, but I agree with you. If as a user I've switched to classic view, I do believe it stays within that, or sorry, within the map view it stays.
Yeah, no, Stuart, I agree. I was just looking at this for a quick way to validate it for specific users. So, but yeah, no, we'll check and then we'll get back to you all, because Stuart, I think you've seen it. Same person that you need to contact for the shortcuts for the screen. So great questions today. We really appreciate it. But yeah, I hope it's, and I imagine it's going to be user based. Both Stuart and myself will confirm it, and either on the next bits or bolts, or directly for those which are interested, drop us a comment or a question here in the chat, and we'll let you know directly as well.
For sure. Perfect. Well, there we go. There was the 2.5 topics that we had to share for today. Just very briefly wrapping up again, and for those of you who are familiar with this, please feel free to have a gulp of your coffee or water, whatever is available. But for those of you who are not familiar, obviously our partner marketing team is available to you. If you don't already have contact with Gabby and the likes of Chris and the teams in other regions, partner marketing at 42gears.com, and obviously our tech support through the email address as you see on the screen, and various other methods, the web chat, intercom button, and many others. So please feel free to reach out to them if there's ever any need for support. They're obviously available to you 24/7 as a partner and as a customer of 42 Gears. There we have it. Thank you so much again for everybody who has joined us. We will see you in 2 weeks' time, being the 29th of October. And I think probably the two of us, I know I'm here, nothing else before then, so probably be the two of us back again.
What day of November? 29th of October. Okay, no, that should be.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Did I say November? Yeah, October. Super. Good. Well, thank you so much again, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Have a good day.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.